Greetings, fuckers. Happy Halloween time, and welcome to a particularly long and nerve calming episode. Now, we don't need to talk about why it is the scariest season of some of our lives. Just know that we are here for you. Everyone's survival bells are ringing, and we are all in this together. So this month in the Patreon private stream of motherfucking videocasts, we've been slowing things down and making things rather peaceful and relaxing. We've been continuing our discussion of building actual self-love, the thing that seems impossible for most of us to genuinely craft and maintain. And these past few episodes have moved on from self-appreciation obstacles, the hell realm, and into practicum. Because to have a target for your love, you need to know that you exist. You need to spend time being with yourself, as in actually spending quality time with yourself, associated with you and your life. Not distractedly, disassociatively, or drunkenly being with yourself, as trauma tends to influence most of us to do. And I'll be honest with you, summarizing that whole conversation into 20 minutes as usual would be defeating the purpose of the work. It would be jammed full. You would have to listen very intently. It wouldn't be nearly as lovely as the recent videos I've been putting out, and therefore you wouldn't get the opportunity to practice this being with yourselfness alongside the show due to all of those issues. So, I have for you today a full, extra long show that I am releasing to everyone from behind the privacy wall. It is a treat time for all. There are no tricks involved. And this episode, it's meant to discuss the rationale of doing this self-time practice work. Why you need to build a new relationship with you if you want to build new relationships with people, work, behavioral patterns, and substances in the rest of your life, for example. We also talk about why it isn't an innate skill to be with us that we naturally all have. Why practice being with you is required, and why you're not weird for kind of panicking when you try. So, please check this show out when you are in the mood to change your usual tone. Consider it a little oasis from life and use it for being with you during these hair-raising times. I also want to give you a heads up that if you're looking for a creepy but warm-hearted adventure for the season that is not at all related to a news channel, a family holiday, or seasonal depression, well, moving on from this recent release that you're about to hear, we have already slipped right into a new ghastly-themed sub-series. This little string of sods is called Navigating Your Haunted, Abandoned Self, a choose-your-own spook venture multi-part series. And in this series, within a series, we're covering stress, the big emotions of sadness, anger, grief, and beyond, tense misalignments between beliefs and actual life, continual attempts to disassociate from your physical being, the what's next pattern of mental torture, and, of course, fear of so many things. But mostly we'll be talking about fear of identity and fear of being seen. So we're going to be working through some of the big monsters that are waiting in so many of us when we try to reconnect with ourselves. You can tap into these individual video podcasts that apply to you, or go through all of them to find out what you may not have known about yourself before. And each topic is going to become the flagship of a new collection in Patreon so that we can continue this work even after this spooky series ends. For what it's worth, Increasing Your Tolerance for Stress is already streaming right now, and it might be rather pertinent. Cool? Cool, fuckers. All right, that's all I've got to share with you this week. Please enjoy this unusually long and relaxing post straight from the private pod. It is meant for your self-work practice. And do check out the intro to the Choose Your Own Spook Venture series coming at you hot in just a few minutes here, in case you are also looking to tour and explore yourself with guidance through the jump scares. Stay spooked on purpose, fuckers, not as a state of existing. Try not to embody your inner demons, especially when they're spitting some generationally cursed incantations at you. Don't look back at events that you can't change now, and save yourself by being with you rather than performing your unconscious disassociation rituals. Until we speak again next time, enjoy being with you, and I'll see you on the other side. Cheers, y'all. Now let's jump into this long-ass episode. Greetings, fuckers. As I mentioned in a text post, my college course has started, and I missed a week of recording. This course is taking quite a lot out of me, but the good news is you can now call me your trusty cognitive psychology progessor, if you want. But today I want to talk through the theories behind the work that we've been doing, to tell you why it has been ordered this way, why we're giving instructions for seemingly simple and innate tasks, what the benefits are, why we would bother doing it, and how to use this material for your greatest possible post-traumatic growth. I'm doing all of this because I also really want to give you another episode to use for practicing being with yourself. This is a point where education is not enough, and the effort can be very uncomfortable. So I'm here to help with some easy listening and watching. I also really want to convince you that this work is necessary and possible, even though it feels impossibly difficult to be easy on ourselves sometimes. And that also seems like an invalid request to make of us. So, like our last episode, that means that this is going to be very gentle and easy, calming, relieving. I really want to encourage you to use these weeks of words and visuals for being in your body, with yourself, associating with the present moment. And so I encourage you to drift in and out of these shows while connecting with you, as discussed in our last episode. If you're here for the faster pace, harder information and research sort of approach, you can listen to pretty much any other episode that I've ever created between 2021 and today, and you will find that tone. But please note that the heady overdrive will only get you so far in your recovery. And that's coming from personal experience. So, welcome to part 5.25 of actually loving yourself. The rationale behind the work. There is a reason for everything, even this hard and stupid soft shit. But before I say anything else today, I do need to clarify that the goal is not having alone time with yourself to the degree that I do. I mentioned last time that 98% of my time is spent solitary these days. I want to admit, actually, that is a miscalculation. I spend at least 99% of my time alone. But this is not intentional. This is not healthy. It's not healing. It is not the goal. It is miserable. And I don't want anyone to think that this is an aspect of my life that I promote for trauma recovery. It's just been a series of unfortunate social events, and it has been devastating. So, while I'm very grateful for the independence and self support that I've learned to give myself throughout these years of pretty isolative living, as well as all the practice that I've gotten being with myself peacefully, which is a very far cry from every other time in my life, I do not recommend this near complete isolation for any fucker. And it is something that I am working on remedying. So, just to keep this quick and clear, independence and autonomy, self sufficiency, and learning to be at peace when alone with you. Yes, huzzah! Important metrics for trauma recovery. But do not take it too far. Being a one-man island is not trauma recovery. That is a trauma typical outcome when our survival skills become maladaptive. And I have to report, even fairly asocial humans do need other humans, which is why understanding our complex PTSD and working out the relational miswirings are so crucial. But now that that's over with, let's talk about how the work that we've been doing will promote these re-socialization goals, even though I'm encouraging you to be alone. And let's also discuss the rest of the rational, education-based thinking that's been behind the episodes, which hasn't been discussed yet. Jumping off from our last post about needing to spend time with oneself, hey, thank you to Donnie, who shouted out that they appreciate all the detailed instructions in that last episode. But also, my guess is that not everyone feels that way. In the last few weeks or months, we've taken a deviation from research per the feeling in my gut that urges me and informs me about what to create. And we started talking about the practical and rather unflashy steps of trauma recovery. And I know that it's really easy to eye roll at this sort of material. I know this because I do it all the fucking time. As I have often said, trauma education, at least for me, feels so responsible, respectable, cut and dry, very solid. Whereas instructions to do the work that is really required for trauma recovery, to soften or engage in new relational behaviors or execute practical trauma recovery steps, that all usually sounds pretty flowery, pretty frivolous, and rather stupid. A little too airy-fairy for me compared to the events that brought me here and the cold hard facts about trauma outcomes, right? Not to mention, these things feel really soft and smushy compared to how we learned to treat ourselves in order to survive in society, in relationships, in public, and in general. So there is a disconnect between trauma recovery and allowing ourselves to trauma recover, to say the least. If you're the type who also has difficulty with self-positivity, self-care, reasonable expectations for yourself, and really letting thyself off any hook, well, I think we eventually hit a wall when we're trying to rehabilitate ourselves after PTSD. If we cannot execute these lighter varieties of self-therapy. And I say all of this to you because, again, I too usually shy away from these more flouncy topics. And I can report I have seen the limitations that this approach has created in my own post-traumatic work and growth. So I feel the need to say to you as strongly and clearly as I can, yeah, I know. I am giving you instructions that might seem rather insulting to some. Is this bitch seriously telling me how to be alone kindly after stirring up my internal self-shaming pot? This is what we get. Yeah, I know. But here's my rationale that I haven't exactly shared. Number one, trauma forces most of us into a tenuous relationship with our bodies, time, and space, because all seem dangerous based on experiences of suffering. And on top of all this splitting and identity issues that we face, number two, we also struggle with combining those three things: time, space, and our bodies. But without being able to mix them all together and comprehend them, that means we fail to have a self, to know who we are in our bodies across that time and space. So, sadly and realistically, that means it is a practice to be embodied and self-connected for a good number of traumatized folks, if not all of us. That is why last time I tried to create this very calming, peaceful, slightly distracting, but not that thought-consuming episode of considerable length to help give you something to breathe and half engage with, as was described in the episode itself. How meta. And I also want to acknowledge that, yeah, I did include a lot of instructions for what is essentially the idea of relaxing while staying aware of yourself. Because many, again, maybe most of us, actually do not have experience with relaxing or with staying with ourselves. And on top of that, we don't even have any models to demonstrate how to do it. Without personal knowledge or any examples, how would we expect ourselves to be able to do this thing, to stay with us comfortably, productively, in a way that is clarifying, grounds us, and helps us to keep moving forward in healthy ways? Especially when that entire description seems completely out of bounds for us to begin with. Figure, most of us were not ever allowed to relax. Not really, not fully. Hypervigilance ran our lives, and most of us are still patterned this way to some degree, in our heads, looking for signs of danger. And the people around us were and are still regularly busy as a way of staying distracted from their own pain and life direction, disassociated into screens, substances, relationships, etc., engaged in martyrdom and codependent behaviors that keep them from noticing themselves, and chasing emotional waterfalls while starting interpersonal battles as a way to externalize their self problems. And therefore, with all of this going on, we observe that the people we know closest are never with themselves either. They are rarely associated with their full lives or full psychologies, and instead are living in a reactionary, disjointed existence. They never defragment their memories or identities. They don't identify their needs. They remain self-unaware and continue carrying inauthentic or introjected self-scorn, generally at an unconscious level. And they continue to be nightmares because of it, abusing the people around them, which promotes our own acceptance and mimicry of these non adaptive behaviors as we are both influenced by them and defending ourselves against them, which has the effect of teaching us these similar short term adaptive but long term harmful self avoidance skills. So, from a hard assed bitch who leans towards trauma learned toxic masculinity more than anything else, my point is, with complex trauma histories, we very much do need to learn and practice how to hang out with us and to be kind to us from the inside out as much as the outside in. That is how the deep wound healing variety of inner work becomes possible, so that the outer change naturally flows forth without self-sabotage. And that is why I am providing instruction on something that might seem so simple. It is simple, but it is not easy. And thirdly, to get back to this list that we started several minutes ago, I didn't forget about it. As far as our rationale rundown goes, I know that I asked you to stir your self-hate pot several times before this stupidly simple self-time spending step. Why? To get more acquainted with what's going on with you. I know it doesn't seem like it makes sense to get a little self-pissy and then to try to spend time with that guy. And I understand that this could throw you for a loop. But, point 3, if you don't first notice and name what you might be holding against yourself deep down on some normally unconscious level, and instead you just try to be with yourself peacefully straight out of the gate, do you know what happens? You try to spend time with you. You find that you're very uncomfortable for unknown reasons. Actually, you're severely annoyed and agitated at a minimum. And it often turns into a self-berating session as you join the angry voices screaming at yourself instead of being with yourself. You end all self-compassion ventures and start comparing yourself instead. So you might end up right back in self-abusing territory, looking at all the ways you're wrong or not enough, re-triggering and re-traumatizing yourself instead of healing after you just set out for all this self-kindness. You might end up doing the exact opposite. For me, this is why all suggestions to just love yourself, just be proud of you, just give yourself real intentional care, just have a you day, sis, historically do not work out. Because advice like that doesn't prepare you for the reasons why we struggle to do those things in the first place. All the contradictory conditioning that we've experienced, all the ghosts in our neurons. And instead, just be nice to yourself advice launches you into the deep end of the pool where you are not prepared for the monsters that lurk beneath in your own psyche. It's like trying to ignore all the reasons why you have a problem with you, which has probably been a lifelong condition at many or most points, and to pretend that those thoughts and feelings and memories just don't exist. So similar to the shallow, small talk interactions available with family or coworkers, that sort of advice suggests that you can, at best, just have this completely surface level relationship with yourself where you ignore all the pain points. like every other dissatisfactory relationship you've probably had in your life. Again, at best. And this just try to be nice to yourself advice without the preemptive work often turns into a self-bullying, self-abusing session that cannot be escaped and sets you backwards in your traumatic thinking at worst. Either way, jumping right into pretending we're cool with ourselves and know how to spend time alone positively often is not the self-replenishing experience that magazines and talk shows and Insta posts suggest when they tell you to slap on a face mask and love thyself. So, my approach is instead to prepare you for the potential negative thoughts and feelings, perhaps those relating to the issues that we discussed in the early parts of the series that might come up as you try to spend time with you, and then to coach you through those pains. Then, you won't be surprised, blindsided, flash flooded by the harsh feelings that most likely are going to start creeping up. And you won't let your own maladaptive devices take over when you connect with the inner voice that tells you all about everything that you've been purposely avoiding. Before you're left alone with these demons, you'll know your enemy thoughts to some degree. The ones that did not originate in you, the ones that actively cause you harm. You'll be prepared for those subconscious memories and feelings and absorbed opinions of shitheads. You'll be on the lookout. Theoretically, they won't be so mysterious, convincing, or difficult to tease apart in the moment that way, because you've already experienced and identified the emotional and cognitive signatures of these psychological abuses throughout our preparatory work in parts 1 through 4 of the series. And instead of joining in with those traumatic self-judgments, you can instead target them for perspective and reparenting work, which we're going to be discussing very soon. Better to be prepared for the potential internal hells that need some steps to be taken before they are extinguished and remodeled than to falsely advertise a 5-star self-experience and let you be very negatively surprised. That's my opinion. And I'm also saying, at the center of all of this, spending time with you while being aware of your self-complaints, while critically challenging those old assumptions, those abuses and miscalculations in your belief system, while you are also building alternative thoughts that are actually self-respectable, self-authentic, self-accepting, and self-beneficial. This legitimately is not only part of trauma recovery, it is the core of trauma recovery. Education, I love it, clearly. Yes, it is important. It does help. Listening to conversations, going to therapy, all of these external resources for recovery, they do matter. But the life you seek is not going to be possible without doing the self-work for yourself. The education must be applied. It must include the simpleton steps of re-socializing yourself. And those steps are most helpful if they start from inside of you before you're bringing them outwards to a crowd. This is because most of us start learning about having and healing complex trauma due to our outward relationship and functionality issues, right? Often it's romantic turmoil, family torture, work disruption, or the brutality of isolation that brings us into contact with the phrase complex PTSD. And as we have learned over and over again, despite our best efforts to scoff and to dismiss the fluffy sounding truth, our relationship with others is defined by our relationship with ourselves, or our relationships between parts of ourselves. We treat others as we treat us, and we treat us as we treat others. So if we're trying to educate ourselves and then jumping right into relationship with others, we're actually jumping a very, very critical step, which is re-socializing our inner being with us, ourselves, to know how to form less punishing and trauma tense thoughts, and therefore relationships. We need to learn to change our inner dialogue, our daily operational instructions that we're having with ourselves for how we normally deal with us throughout the day. This will allow us to change how we deal with everyone and everything else throughout every day. Without this step, we're likely to just end up in another codependent, weirdly attached, or otherwise abusive relationship, because those are the patterns, the thoughts, the trends still flipping around in our own head. And they're still being labeled correct in an implicit or explicit manner. Being self-abusive, self-non-accepting, self-critical, self-fearing to us means that we will have the same thoughts about others or assume that they have the same thoughts about us. And there will probably be many accompanying resentments because our needs are not being met in this setup. Even if all of this is taking place on an unconscious level, it is affecting the way that we behave every second of our lives. So if we're jumping over building self-forgiveness and acceptance, it means we also jump over building self-esteem, self-respect, self-comfort, and self-reliance. We therefore are going into social situations without any self-support. And then, instead of healthy, balanced, autonomous relational success, we just land in a relationship that's symptomatic of the way our relationship with ourself is already ailing, either mirroring it or trying to fix it, reflecting the hole in ourself back at us through our social companions, or attempting to patch up the holes in ourself with someone else's spackle. We try to fill our self voids with someone or something else, rather than building that sense of safety and belonging coming from within. And everything gets all fucky from there as we become dependent. We end up clinging to or fleeing from others instead of setting our own pace and being securely attached to ourselves. We require certain roles to be filled in our lives instead of learning to wear new hats, which puts us at the mercy of those outside others. And we're probably not choosing healthy ones. Meaning, not only do our interpersonal relationships fail time and time again when we skip over having a positive self relationship first, which they do and they will, we might have a temporary bump in self-esteem via new relationships. But ultimately, I think we all know we will return to earth, or hell, back to self-hating once the excitement, the novelty of that new relationship wears off and we realize they are not the remedy to all our problems. So we just never really end up fixing ourselves and keep ending up back in a purgatory or state of suffering. But we do it with another person, as if that makes it better. Yay, we'll be burning together. And on top of that, our relationships with the external world also become very extreme and fraught when we don't first build a positive self relationship, such as our relationships with work, health, substances, and any other coping measures. Again, we will try to fill the holes in ourselves with any means possible. Folks with addictive personalities, holler. I'm thinking of and being with you. So note that even if we support ourselves with highly functional coping mechanisms, like working or walking for self-support, either way, it is pulling us closer and closer to the very people who taught us to be complexly traumatized. Just as we become over-reliant on individuals when we lack a centralized self-station, we can also learn to rely on psyche-supporting chemical and biological tools that have long-term negative consequences, all because we do not have ourselves to lean on for short-term comfort or long-term stability. And instead, without this healthy self-relationship, we will get ourselves trapped in negative relationships and harmful habits as substitutes for having a positive view of or relationship with ourself, as a way to numb or lessen the pain of being alive, being trapped in a brain and body that we fear inhabiting. We will turn to any means necessary without that internal support system. So, my point is, before a healthy relationship with another person is possible, before kicking an addiction is possible, before reprogramming your relationship to work is possible, before having more balanced and comprehensive views of the world in general is possible, before any of the usual metrics of CPTSD recovery is possible, a healthy relationship with yourself is required. I wish that it wasn't the case. I wish education and learning and rigid self-management did the job, because I'm great at those. I am not inherently skilled at this self-embodiment, self-trust, self-kindness shit either. But I can tell you from these years of spending a whole lot of time with myself, there is no mental substitute for this full-selved, holistic, long-term recovery necessity of being with you and being okay with you. In order to be more than a very tiny boat, shaken and disturbed and set into a survival state by every rogue breeze that kicks up a wave, you must reconnect with yourself across time and memory and condition. You must acknowledge the self-judgments, recontextualize the negativity, lay down the knives that you hold against your memories of you, and bring yourself back into you for a sense of safety, calm, and rightness that comes from within. Then, and only then, you have a stable and solid feeling home base from which you can add or subtract other aspects of life, knowing that you're all right no matter what, because you have yourself. Those other aspects do not make or break your experience. They are not the basis of your life or your safety or your happiness or comfort or identity. Knowing that you're free, your only tether is to you, and that it is a completely safe relationship that you can always count on. Because at the root of it, this is the only relationship that you can always count on. You have yourself all the time. You are in control of yourself all the time. That cannot be said for another single relationship in your lifetime. You are there when things are hard. You can trust yourself to care for you, even when the times are rough. In fact, when things get difficult, you can get easier on yourself, protect yourself, give yourself the things that you need, including the emotional support that we just can't expect anyone else to lend. You are on your side. And everything else that you add to that centralized, connected, supported inner state is just complementary. It's just an accessory, an option, an extra feature. Every other relationship, every decision, every move that you make is just a little extra color and texture in your life, not the crux of your being. And these are the reasons for what we're working through right now. Settling our anxiety, our existential dread, our persistent fear of being embodied and being in charge of ourselves while we try to relate to unpredictable others. All of these things are not true threats if you can rely on you. All these possible self grudges and all of this gentle, caring garbage is absolutely necessary to engage with and to work through. Because the longer that we write off those efforts as impossibly hard, painful, and maybe even irrelevant because it's in the past, or if we write it off as being too soft, unnecessary, and some stupid bullshit that should be innate if it was important, well, the longer we stay trapped in a self-made purgatory where we know all about recovery from our impressive trauma internet educations, but are not executing the required steps of recovery. And instead, we stay frustrated, stagnated, or even slipping backwards. The practical behavioral change steps being discussed may appear easy, and they are super judgeable if you are in that mood. And because they go against everything we've been told, they are difficult to put into practice. We have bountiful reasons and myriad excuses not to do this hard and soft self-relational work. And please do keep in mind that that goes for all humans, not only the ones identifying as traumatized. Without reflection, self-reintegration, and perspective recalibration that comes from being with ourselves and nothing else, we are doomed to stay stuck or to become more rigid and extreme. So, glances at news headlines. Maybe we all have a lot left to learn about being with and reforming a healthy self and self relationship. If only we could just shut out some of that noise, some of the fear, some of the introjected abuse, and the survival scrambling of daily life. All the noise that distracts us and takes up our very precious bandwidth, and actually could just create a cocoon to instead just be in a state of peace, calm, and curiosity, quietly observing our life from inside across time and in this present moment with ourselves, life would get so much easier for all of us. This work is contagious. Every relationship, every work meeting, every tenuous moment of every day would be simpler with ourselves finally, for once, on our sides. The excellent news is that we can accomplish these goals. And in my experience and educational understanding, we must. But it will, seriously, perhaps insultingly, maybe counterintuitively and painfully, take practice to just be with you and to foster an amicable relationship that you didn't know you could have or were allowed, or that you absolutely needed. So, with all of this in mind, I want to remind you that being abusive to yourself is not correct. It is not moral. It does not mean you are disciplined, and it comes with absolutely no personal merit. It will earn you no points except from abusive people who want you to keep doing their work for them. So, if you can, try to be with yourself gently. Lay down any judgment that this is something everyone should be able to do already. And alternatively, take comfort in the fact that, indeed, many of us, most of us, do struggle with it, if that's something that still burns your butt. And then I encourage you to start practicing, directing yourself through your day with a feathery touch, giving care to your inner kiddo, and trying to sense the safety of internal feeling of you, of internal love that you can offer you, which creates a barrier between you and the harshness of the world, a blanket fort that you build around yourself, if that helps you to visualize. And if you're still having hangups, please stick around for another episode on what you'll find inside your abandoned self once you get in there, the potential challenges of re-embodying, and all the reasons you might want to flee. We will talk about the worst emotions, continual attempts to disassociate, stress, points of tension between you and your ideals, fear of identity and being seen, and the cognitive what's next, and how to deal with these demons next time. From there, we'll be getting into the perspective work that we began several parts ago. Overall, the rationale behind this work being combining embodiment with perspective hygiene and relationship work, the hard and soft efforts that start within, which is what we call holistic, lasting, long-term, self-directed, complex trauma recovery that is finally recorded in the brain, body, and behaviors to change your whole life. So I will see you, fucker, in the reparenting section of this self-love process. Before then, I'll catch you in the Entering Your Own Haunted Self episode. And until that fateful recording, hear me out. Give this a shot, even if it sounds too simple to be significant. I think you'll find being with yourself gracefully and consciously is an easy concept, but a pretty difficult reality. And I hope that being here with ourselves together inspires you to permiss and persevere through this effort. You're not alone, even when you're scrimmaging being with yourself. So, again, hear yourself, feel yourself, heal yourself, hail yourself. Cheers, y'all. And here's another minute or several of peaceful views for your calm, breathing, self being practicum. Talk to you soon. Bye. Did this episode help you? We are a one human, one dog supported show spreading independent research on trauma and holistic health. And we need your help to keep sharing ours. If you're able, please consider becoming a monthly supporter on Patreon, PayPal, or Ko-fi. Support links can be found in the show description. 5-star reviews, follows, and shares also make our web wide world go round. Thank you for being here and supporting a recovering planet. Hail yourself and cheers, fuckers.